Doing an amateur exam and getting an Australian call sign should be a routine activity that hundreds do each year without drama. And indeed it largely has for many years. We need exams for newcomers to get licensed and replace the old-timers dropping off to retain on-air activity. And 2020 saw revived interest in amateur radio as the perfect activity to do while stuck at home. But recently, exams have been a hot topic, and deservedly so. Service has recently been tardy, and lots of people are angry. So upset that ACMA, in an email bulletin to amateurs, has been forced to tell people waiting for exam results and call signs to settle down, be patient, and be nice. The reputation of amateurs in the eyes of officialdom has been tarnished due to the inappropriate and abusive behaviour of a few. And because of slow, inefficient and frustrating processes, those wishing to enter amateur radio are becoming discouraged. The same goes for volunteer invigilators across Australia, without whom the amateur exam system would not function. No one is winning from the recent problems. Amateur radio in Australia needs an exam and call sign issue system that is rigorous, impartial, efficient and value for money. It is the job of the University of Tasmania through the Australian Maritime College to administer the amateur exam and call sign recommendation system in Australia. Arrangements and standards are set down in a deed document with the Australian Communications and Media Authority, or ACMA, who has ultimate oversight. For example, the deed states that certificates and call sign recommendations must be processed within 15 business days. Actual performance has often been worse, and ACMA can relieve AMC of its duties if it's not up to scratch. When you read the deed, it looks like the ACMA has all the power. But the ACMA can choose not to enforce it. Or they can give AMC dispensation on meeting certain targets. ACMA can be a hard customer or it can be a soft customer. All evidence is that they've been on the softer side. I suspect they'd have been tougher if it was a standard fee-for-service procurement contract, with penalties applying if service standards were not met. As the main users of this system, VK amateurs deserve answers. We haven't heard much from the AMC. Apart from that exhortation to be nice, more could have been said earlier by ACMA. For example, how they are holding AMC to account and what's being done to cut the backlog. ACMA may outsource an activity, but this should not allow them to shirk responsibility if it isn't done to standard. Many amateurs were disappointed the ACMA email bulletin did not explain this beyond a vague claim that it was due to factors outside AMC's control. A lot of amateurs would also have liked to have heard more from those who style themselves as amateur representative bodies. How aware were they of problems? Were they trying to get answers? And was there any advocacy to get ACMA to enforce its deed with AMC? I'll say more on that a little later. Now, of course, 2020 is most known as the year COVID-19 hit. Many things that would normally happen slowed down. There were also big changes to people's work arrangements and whether you could do in-person amateur exams. However, Tasmania, where AMC is based, went in hard early on, and they were also able to lift restrictions earlier than, say, Victoria. Another thing that happened mid-year was what you could call call signs for life. Instead of amateur call signs being dependent on licence level, any VK amateur could have almost any vacant 3-letter call sign with only a few restrictions, regardless of licence level. That was particularly handy for foundation hams, whose 4-letter suffixes were not convenient for some digital modes. You'd also expect some standard and even advanced amateurs to change to a call sign they liked better, taking advantage of the bigger range available. I did a video on this in July 2020. Call sign reform was foreshadowed for months. Various bodies were surveying amateurs. ACMA thinking favoured a less prescriptive approach, and change affecting, as a minimum, foundation amateurs was on the cards once their privileges were expanded to include digital modes in September 2019. AMC should have been planning for a likely higher workload, especially noting that a selling point of AMC's bid for the deed was it had the backing of a larger body in the University of Tasmania. And because of this is straight transactional stuff, a higher workload should also mean higher than expected revenue with potential economies of scale if fixed costs are spread across more applications. AMC were apparently caught unawares, with a deluge of applications for changed call signs increasing their workload and processing times. It would have been interesting whether ACMA sought AMC's advice on their capacity to deliver before announcing the changes to the public. In any event, it wasn't long before the problem started. On 14th of August 2020, AMC advised that they got permission from ACMA to extend the time for processing call sign applications from 15 to 45 business days. There was significant disquiet in the amateur community over these exam and call sign delays. It came up in WIA board meetings in October 2020. Advice was to complain to AMC first, then, if no satisfaction, ACMA. Significantly, there is no mention of the WIA itself contacting ACMA, advocating prompt service delivery as per the deed. And I can confirm that ACMA received no correspondence from the WIA at this time on this issue. The Radio Amateur Society of Australia, who I'll elaborate on later, emailed ACMA on October 28 expressing concern for members about services provided by AMC. Both call sign issue and exam processes were apparently taking too long. Of note is that the letter was signed by the RASA Vice President. It states that the President, who declared a conflict of interest, was not involved in association discussions on this issue. The WIA said more the following month. On the 10th of November, their website carried a prominent item on AMC's delays. It stated that these were now up to 90 days. No satisfactory reasons had been provided to those individuals who raised it with ACMA. The WIA said it would liaise with both ACMA and AMC in the near term to discuss. This could well have happened in person or by telephone, but there is no available evidence of written contact, at least with ACMA. A fortnight later, we had that behaviour and courtesy warning from ACMA I mentioned before. That was relayed to members by both RASA and the WIA. As I mentioned before, ACMA's bulletin was light on specific reasons for the mounting backlog and did not tell us what was being done to fix it. It didn't even say how much time applicants should expect. The WIA commented on ACMA's bulletin in their board comment from President Greg Kelly. That went to air on the December 6 Sunday broadcast. The WIA position was that bad behaviour was unacceptable, but there are frustrations with the system that needed to be fixed. And the delays seem to be getting longer, with the process described as obviously broken. The WIA said that it's offered to assist AMC, saying that contrary to some people's views, the deed permits subcontracting. So this is how things look in late 2020. Processing delays were unacceptably long. ACMA was telling us to be nice, but wasn't really managing the deed to drive better performance. We weren't hearing enough from AMC. Various representative bodies weren't getting any joy either. And I should mention, this has been during a year in which there has been a discernible upsurge in amateur radio interest and activity. Given this apparent impasse, I thought I'd do some digging myself. If I found anything, I'd make a video. What you're seeing now is the result of hours of reading and research. It also costs money, so you should all go and buy my books. Seriously though, I think it's been worthwhile. It won't fix the problems, but I hope it will inform you a bit more about how the exam and call sign system operates. And I make no apology for its length, as I think it's necessary. First of all, some background. My, and possibly your, time dates back to when it was the Department of Communications and they administered the exams. There are some different outsourced arrangements since. The one before this one was administered by the Wireless Institute of Australia for many years. For those who don't know, the WIA is also our IARU member Amateur Representative Society that publishes Amateur Radio magazine. As far as ACMA was concerned, the WIA had two roles. That is, its traditional role as an amateur representative body and its newer role as outsourced service provider. These latter arrangements were governed via a WIA ACMA deed document. WIA did certain services and collected user fees in exchange. This was on a cost recovery basis, with no money coming in from ACMA. If costs exceeded income, then WIA members would have to cop the shortfall. The deed was for a fixed term ending February 2019. Just before the deed finished, ACMA invited proposals from those who wanted to take the job over. The WIA, as incumbent, and others applied. We heard the results of that process on 1st of February 2019. The WIA's proposal to retain exam and call sign management was not accepted. Instead, the business went to the University of Tasmania's Australian Maritime College. After a gap in early 2019, where there were no exams, the AMC took over under a new deed with ACMA. AMC's fees were significantly higher than what the WIA charged, though some adjustments occurred later to the benefit of foundation licence candidates. There's a lot to explain here. Why did the WIA lose to the AMC? I don't know for sure, but if you saw my earlier WIA videos, you'll have seen that the WIA board was not particularly stable around 2016-2017. Board members did not all get along and some resigned. They also went through a lot of treasurers. There are operating losses. There are concerns about accountability and corporate governance. A silly decision was made to hold an annual general meeting on the beautiful but expensive to reach Norfolk Island. That was a bad look for an organisation wanting to be seen as open, accountable and cost effective. There are speaking tours at radio clubs exposing the WIA's issues. Around this time, there is an attempt to spill the board with a special meeting and make a fresh start. That failed, but shortly after there is a board election with new people elected, which I did a video on. Things seem to settle down for a bit, but in mid-2018 there is a clumsy and later rescinded attempt to expel certain members. Not that they really needed to. Membership was still falling, and financial pressures forced the magazine to drop from 11 to 6 issues per year. However, in fairness to the current 2021 WIA board, I should point out that most are recent appointees, and none were directors when the issues peaked before 2017. Much politicking happened on social media, no doubt to the distraction and annoyance of many. A WIA reform group was formed to expose what it saw as the WIA board's failings and maladministration. This reform group included ex-directors and other former WIA office bearers. They initially welcomed the new WIA board. Then the aims of some involved changed to include founding of a new non-WIA representative organisation and in exam management. More on both later. So why did the WIA lose the exam administration and callsign recommendation work to the AMC? I can think of 5 possible reasons. ACMA was very aware of internal issues within the WIA. We know because it was mentioned in passing at a 2017 Senate committee hearing and subsequently on the WIA website. They would have known that 3/4 of VK amateurs were not members, reducing its claim to representativeness. Although performance under the deed is most important, ACMA would want to be confident that the WIA's administration of delegated duties was impartial and be seen as such. AMC had a more arm's-length relationship with the amateur community. That might have been seen as desirable given the heat surrounding the WIA at the time. ACMA documents reveal that although the WIA performed the nuts and bolts of exam and callsign administration okay, there are some issues with information and reporting. ACMA takes reporting seriously and wanted better performance here. Even though it was not necessary to be a registered training organisation to do the exam work, ACMA preferred the new provider to be one anyway. There is no question that the winner, being an educational institution, was an RTO. AMC also claimed it could call upon University of Tasmania resources if needed. WIA had no other bigger body it could call on. Please remember that last sentence. AMC submitted a better, briefer and more professional response document. The WIA proposal was much longer and had other guff the ACMA would not have been interested in. I pity the poor bureaucrat who had to read it. The WIA people writing it meant well, and I know that some amateurs liked it, but it clearly did not win ACMA's support. AMC had a record in maritime radio exam administration. That was also subject to an arrangement with the ACMA. If it did that well, then that would have assisted their amateur proposal. So, with an established record, professional relationships and university backing, the AMC looked a pretty safe pair of hands, despite it not being the incumbent. Whereas the WIA, while a known quantity, had reputational issues, was unsatisfactory on reporting, and submitted an inferior application. A bureaucrat recommending AMC would not get into trouble. AMC's appointment stunned some amateurs at the time, but I think you can now see why their application succeeded. Who gave the Australian Maritime College the idea to bid for the amateur radio deed in the first place? I do not know and won't speculate here. However, AMC would not have been able to win the business without subject matter expertise from within the amateur radio movement. This came in the form of Glenn Dunstan and Andrew Smith, who had got to become amateur radio advisors to AMC. Glenn Dunstan has significant experience in maritime radio communication, is a former WIA director, and has had contact with ACMA in various industry and other capabilities. He is a familiar name from the WIA Reform Group and then President of the Radio Amateur Society of Australia since its inception. This is a new group that seeks to challenge the long-established WIA as Australia's national amateur representative society. Andrew Smith brings experience from the education sector, both professionally and in amateur education through Ham College in WA. He was one of the directors who raised concerns over WIA governance. He is also involved in RASA as Vice President. RASA stress that both Dunstan and Smith advise the AMC in an individual capacity only. ACMA will say that their decision on who got the deed was based on merit, and I gave some fairly solid reasons why this could be so before. Nevertheless, given the background, some amateurs might still view ACMA's decision on the deed as a loss of face for the WIA and a win for RASA-linked forces. Some WIA members liked the idea of exams being done by an amateur body and it lifting the Institute's profile. Others are relaxed about losing the exam function. It was not necessarily a money earner. The official line was that it gave the WIA an opportunity to refocus. Without exams, there might have been potential for the Institute to advocate more assertively for VK amateurs, without the complication of a deed relationship. We'll get an inkling if this is so later. Not all volunteer WIA exam invigilators have come across to AMC. Under the previous system, candidates would know their results on the same day. Marking and disclosing that result was one of the satisfactions of this role. In contrast, under the AMC system, papers are marked centrally with a lag time of weeks, if not more. Also, some would support the WIA out of loyalty to it, but not an organisation that has nothing but a commercial relationship with amateur radio. Something you may notice is I didn't use the term contract to describe the arrangement between ACMA and the AMC. That's because there isn't one. A contract legally involves a consideration, i.e. payment. That's the normal way government agencies outsource things. They invite bids from companies to do things in return for payment. And there are various contract management and supervision roles the department maintains, with financial penalties for non-performance. Instead, the term deed is used to describe ACMA's arrangement with AMC and that with the WIA previously. The deed gives AMC exclusive right to do certain things, like administer exams and recommend call signs. Money is collected from the amateur applicant in exchange for this work. AMC is expected to make this work self-funding, with no subsidy from ACMA. This is unlike the old days, where exam fees were very low, but the posts and telegraphs would have made a loss on them. Those who want lower exam fees need to work out how to accomplish this without involving ACMA subsidy, which is not provided for under the deed. This could involve simplifying, automating, or decentralising some processes, like exam marking, or doing some other lucrative activity, possibly involving call signs, to cross-subsidise. More ideas on that later. Because no money flows from the ACMA to AMC, there is no means to withhold payments if service is not up to scratch. The only thing the ACMA can do is to consider another provider. That would be considered high risk, since the procurement plan describes the market as thin, and the previous provider had shortcomings according to ACMA. Love the one you're with seems to be their approach. All business risk appears to be borne by AMC. If fewer people sit all tiers of amateur exams, then that means less income for AMC. Constant fixed costs have to be spread over fewer users, which is bad for affordability. And there have been publicity about people sitting US exams here, which are run outside the AMC system. On the other hand, there could be upsides with more modern assessment methods. This was foreshadowed in an update just after AMC got the contract. There are also opportunities in the callsign issuing part of the business. Even if ham numbers stay static, there are ways to manufacture demand for changed or added callsigns. For example, while most hams have one callsign, some have two or more. While objectively unnecessary, like Rolex watches or purchased bottled water, there are people with more money than brains who will pay dearly for a vanity or scarcity product. Especially if you add a touch of competition, ego, and personalisation. Your chances are probably higher if you target a demographic with a high capacity to pay. Australians' personal wealth typically peaks in late adulthood, say around age 60 or more. Every single one of the conditions I just mentioned applies to amateur radio call signs. The shorter the call sign, the fewer of them there are. Hams, notably DXs and contesters, are completely obsessed with them. Many hams are around an age where ability to pay peaks for many people. If you could release blocks of more desirable and shorter call signs and charge accordingly, then there's potential revenue stream made from thin air. All it needs is a stroke of the pen from ACMA and it's a goer. It's trivial stuff, but it's called innovation and adding value in a market economy. If people are willing to pay for something, then it's slightly intolerant to query the weirdness or folly of their choice under a socially and economically liberal zeitgeist. Also, encouraging such flexibility and choice, to use their language, seems to be one of ACMA's driving ideologies. If we could somehow profit off short call sign egotism to make AMC's books balanced while reducing fees for foundation hams and or under 30s, then there might even be some greater good benefits from it. Anyway, that's another topic. Okay, so what did I get from my Freedom of Information fishing trip? I requested a bunch of stuff from ACMA about AMC's performance of the deed and representations made by various amateur bodies. Yep, I had to reply and pay for it, but I think it was worth it. I'll discuss my catch in a moment. People sometimes have issues with getting FOI stuff from government departments, but I found ACMA's service prompt and courteous. 6 documents were released, 5 in full, 1 partially. I'll now run through them. The first is the annual report that AMC needs to submit to ACMA. As you can see from all the black lines, some information was considered commercially sensitive or confidential. The first page is about exam activity. Information like forecasts were edited out, but we do know the number of exams by type, as you can see on the numbers presented. It doesn't say so, so I can't be sure whether it's calendar or financial year in 2019. Anyway, if you wanted to compare with them with previous years, have a look at some of the past information the WIA has published and you might be able to find some comparisons. You can also see AMC activity in certification services and call sign recommendations. Other work has included building a call sign database lookup webpage. That was completed in January 2020, with updates made daily since. There was to be a syllabus review panel. As has previously been publicised, that got disbanded, with the function reverting to ACMA. AMC claimed to have met all service levels subject to time being allowed for system development. However, bear in mind that this is a report for the previous year. 2 significant complaints are reported, although the identity of the complainants was confidential. However, one concerned intellectual property. This has been an issue that the WIA has referred to in its publications over the last year or so. I mentioned before the deluge of call sign applications arising from the rule changes. AMC estimate there were 300 more than expected. They requested an extension from 15 to 45 business days to process them. ACMA grants AMC their request, noting they had to do other university-related work. Things were getting worse, not better. AMC tells ACMA it can't meet even the extended times. ACMA agrees that maritime applications are more important than amateurs. Instead of a 45-day deadline, it has become indefinite. In the final email, AMC thanks ACMA for, and I quote, going in to bat for us. The obvious question then is who is batting for the amateurs? As I mentioned before, the delays were becoming a talking point amongst amateurs and their organisations by spring. This is an email from RASA to ACMA expressing concern about the delays. ACMA reply claiming the source of the delays was outside AMC's control, but they were only temporary. On the 25th of November, the day after ACMA told applicants to be respectful, they asked AMC about progress on processing applications. These were very calm emails, just asking for information. They didn't ask AMC to lift their game. However, AMC were able to report that the number of outstanding cases had dropped to 200, although there is increasing demand from both marine and amateur. This brings us to the end of the material received via FOI. In its 18 January 2021 update, ACMA advised that AMC had almost cleared its backlog and processing times would soon return to normal. Hence, most of the timeliness issues are historical, reaching a peak between August and December last year. What's the upshot? All the evidence is that anything AMC requests, they get. AMC even thanked ACMA for going into bat for us. That's in one of the emails I mentioned before. I hope it's just loose language, but this sounds too chummy for my liking. ACMA should instead be all about getting the best possible customer service from bodies it outsources jobs to. The variation to suspend one of the deed's few performance standards and grant indefinite processing times still has not been rescinded nearly 6 months after it was granted. We also learned that AMC may have the backing of a university, but its people could be diverted on university work. That may reduce their availability for meeting deadlines set out in the deed. And marine operators take priority over amateurs, with slower service for the latter. That's a risk that AMC had, but the WIA, for all its faults, did not. Then there's representation from amateur bodies. It may concern WIA members watching this that their organisation apparently did not express their concerns directly in writing to ACMA regarding exam and callsign issue delays. Yet every survey of members indicates that national and international representation is WIA's #1 job. What was the WIA doing here? The Radio Amateur Society of Australia did express concerns through one email, although they are in a position where their leadership has a personal relationship as advisor to AMC. It's up to their members to consider whether people having dual roles is beneficial or whether it compromises their ability to represent members without fear or favour. As at January 2021, things do seem to be getting better. The backlog is less than it was. But if nothing else, those involved need to learn from this experience, which, as anyone who knows how obsessed amateurs are with call signs, was not unforeseeable. As I said at the start, amateur radio in Australia needs an exam and call sign issue system that is rigorous, impartial, efficient and value for money. And although ACMA may have outsourced some jobs, it carries ultimate accountability as to their performance, which has been subpar in recent months. I've told you everything I know, but I might have missed things. Apart from the FOI request that I didn't contact any organisation mentioned before making this video. But you will soon be able to browse the FOI documents for yourself as they will be published by ACMA on its disclosure log. Look out for them around the 1st of February. I'll add a link to the video description below so you can find it. Now, it is possible that more information will become available when the annual report for 2020 gets done and if someone puts in a subsequent FOI request to get it. In the meantime, I thought it was important that the VK amateur community had an account of events. This video, to the best of my ability, is history's first draft.